For this video, I'm going to be going through each of the core set rares in the red color for Mythgard, and I'm going to be talking about which ones I would recommend crafting if you're a brand new player, which ones see play, and if they do see play, in what kind of deck art types, and just kind of overall talking about the rares so that you know what to expect from red rares in Mythgard kind of in general. And so without further ado, we're just going to dive right in here and start with Extract Life. This is a very good card. It absolutely sees play. It sees play in a lot of different deck archetypes, actually. Mono red aggressive lists or red heavy aggressive and mid-range lists will sometimes include this. For example, I've seen versions of the Orpheum mono red list that run this because Orpheum deals damage to both players and you kind of need to heal up yourself while abusing your opponent. This is a good way to do so. And honestly, it's just a efficient removal card. The big drawback is the 3 red gems. But if you're in a very red heavy deck, then that's not as big of a deal. So this card is good. I don't know if I would say it's must craft, however, in red, because if you're playing red in any sort of hybrid decks, or if red is your splash color, if you will, meaning not the primary focus of your deck, then this card can be a bit hard to trigger. So it's good. You should expect to see it. I don't know if I would call it a must craft for a new player, unless you're trying to build, again, one of those mono red lists or very red heavy lists. Next up is Dead Man's Eyes. I think I've only ever seen this once on the ladder, ever, because you have to spend 2 gems. You spend 2 mana to put it on a lane, and then you still have to win coin flips when things die just to get any value at all from this. This is just not very good. That's it. Short. I don't recommend crafting it. It's just not very good. Doesn't see a lot of play. Dragon's Teeth. This is a card that used to be a staple in a very dominant archetype in the alpha, but sees a little bit less play now. It does, however, still see some play, specifically in stretcher decks, because in a stretcher deck you want your opponent drawing a bunch of cards so that they're going to be taking damage, and we'll show the stretcher a little bit later on. So my recommendation is, if you really want to play a stretcher control deck, then you're going to have to craft these anyway. Otherwise, I don't think it's a must craft for new players because it just does not see much play outside of those archetypes. I've seen a couple of aggro mid-rangey lists that also include it just to like maximize their ability to draw creatures with rush, for example. But for the most part, not what I would consider to be a staple. However, Firesong Prodigy, our next card up, is very much a staple. This is one that I would recommend crafting. If you're going to be playing red like at all, this is a very, very good card. It's a 2/2 for 2, which is good enough, but you're also adding an ignition to your hand, so you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. It's very versatile. It gets played in aggressive lists. It gets played in control lists. It just sees an awful lot of play. Next up is Blood Dolls. And this card does see play, but it only sees play in vampire tribal lists. They're not really popular on the ladder because there's a number of ways that I think are more competitive to play red. But if vampires are your thing, if you just really like them as, you know, a mythological creature, or you just really like the archetype or it intrigues you, then by all means, craft it. Have fun. But if you're a new player and you're trying to get the most bang for your buck, I don't recommend crafting them in that regard. Blood Moon. Blood Moon does see some play. It has a really cool effect, and it can be kind of a bunker buster in aggressive mirrors. Like if you're playing an aggressive red list against somebody else playing an aggressive red list, and you have Blood Moon and they don't, then sometimes you can just win the game on the spot by playing Blood Moon, trading your board into their board. You gain a ton of life, you draw cards to replace the board, and then, you know, in theory, they don't have resources. You've got a fistful of them now, and you kind of just win the game. So it does see play. I don't know if I would call it a must craft, because that's typically the only use that you really see from it is in those kind of aggressive decks where you want to use it to kind of either, you know, like I said, like take control of the board or put somebody way behind on resources, etc., etc. But that's about it. So it sees play. Know that this card exists. You know, keep it in the back of your mind, but I don't know that I would craft it if I was a brand new player. Next up is Dashing Ringmaster. This is a card that used to be a very much must craft, excuse me, in the alpha. It's been through a couple of changes. It's still very good now, but it's no longer, in my opinion, the must craft card, must include card in red that it used to be. It does still see play. It can do some really funny things in certain lists. I think it pairs very well with purple, for example. Being able to give your ninjas rush is really cool because the ninjas are very versatile and they help you control the board. So in decks like that, you want it. It's good. I don't think it's a must craft if you're a new player, though, because it's not going to go in every one of your red lists. Meanwhile, Shopworn Bull is very much a great red card. In just about every red list, you want Shopworn Bull. A 2/5 for 3 is a really big stat line. This is a utility action, so you can do this the turn it comes into play and every turn thereafter, in addition to attacking or taking other actions. So it's card filtration. It helps you with card quality, not quantity, but it's still a very relevant effect. And as I said, a 2/5 for 3 is good enough. This is a really good card in red. So right now, up till this point, Fire Song I'd recommend crafting. Shopworn Bull I would recommend crafting. Again, if you're a new player who wants to play red, those two are very good. Next up we have Strigoi Familiar. This is just like the Blood Dolls. If you want to play Vampire Tribal, by all means, craft it. Outside of that, this just does not see play, and I cannot in good faith recommend crafting it. Next up we have the Stretcher. This, with the combination of Dragon's Teeth, again, those two go in the same kind of Stretcher control deck. Typically in the past, Stretcher decks used to either be red-blue or red-yellow. I think now the best versions, in my opinion, are still red-yellow because Misanthropia does not hit your own durability. There was a time in the alpha where artifacts did not have durability, so you could play Cataclysm and not feel bad, but overall, again, Stretcher is still viable, technically, but not as popular or as powerful as it used to be. And so unless you're going to craft that very specific deck, I don't recommend crafting these as a new player. You've just got better stuff that you can build. Next up we have Alacrity. This does sometimes see play, usually in decks where it's included, it's as a one of. It's kind of like a finisher. It gives everything a bit of reach. If you've got a wide board and they play a bunch of blockers, then you can give everything agile. It also gives them the +1/+0, so it can help close out games, but it's not included in all red decks by any means. And even the ones that want to run this or could benefit from it, they don't all include it because it is pretty situational, so I don't recommend crafting it. At least not as a new player. Next up we have Howling Abyssal. This is a card that used to be a guaranteed auto-include in the alpha, but has been through some changes, and now the current version is okay. The demise of all players discard cards at random till they have 5 or less cards in hand is really good against other control decks or decks that have a large hand, but the fact that this comes down as a 4-drop, usually if people are burning cards, you know, once per turn, every turn up until that point, by the time you play this and it dies, they're just not likely to have 5 or more cards in their hand, so it just ends up being a 4/3 most of the time. So it's not as good as it used to be. I don't recommend crafting it. It just doesn't trigger enough to be worth it, in my opinion. So we're going to move on to the last 2 red cards, both of which, in my opinion, are powerhouses. Wings of Abaddon is amazing. Absolute must craft. In my opinion, this actually might be my favorite red rare, period. It is a card you want to play in control. It is a card you want to play in aggro. It is a card you want to play in mid-range. The fact that it's only 1 gem means it's very splashable, but being able to pay to deal 4 damage right away is very important because you can damage your opponent, obviously, and that's the way that it's most commonly used. But even in control decks, this is like removal in many ways. Like, you can play this and then just trade immediately with an opposing threat that is causing a problem and feel really good about it. And this is not like the Elder Scrolls Legends where you have to worry about rune breaks or anything, so Overrun has really no inherent drawback, no downside at all. So this is just a very powerful card. You want this if you're playing red, just period. Like I said, I don't think I've ever built a red deck, like ever, that doesn't run Wings of Abaddon. And then the last card is Magma Tar. This card is also pretty amazing. You want to craft this if you're a new player. This does see play in just about every archetype, certainly in control for obvious reasons. Being able to blow up potentially 3 opposing minions is a big deal. But even in aggressive lists, this is very, very strong, because if you've got a body on the board and they place a blocker, this is a very high tempo play, because you can typically play Magma Tar to get rid of the blocker, get your damage in, and then you've also developed a body on top of it to continue pressuring them further. It's just a very good card. Much like Wings of Abaddon, I don't think there's a red deck I've built where I'm not including Magma Tar. So that's it for red, because we've already talked about Dissonant Drone in a previous video. We're gonna just do a quick recap. So if you're a new player and you want to play red and you're saying, hey, what are the red rares that I think will get me an awful lot of mileage? In my opinion, it is Wings of Abaddon, Magma Tar, Shopworn Bull, and Firesong Prodigy. Those are your marquee, like very, very good. You will use them in a number of decks, red rares from the core set of Mythgard. And that's it for this video. So if you made it this far, I appreciate you. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you will stick around for future videos.